The devoted father, Daniel Reeves, had always believed he understood his daughter better than anyone, yet recent weeks had left him uneasy in ways he could not explain. Every morning, 12-year-old Emily slipped into her uniform with a smile that felt forced, her eyes carrying a faint dimness that made him wonder what she was hiding. That day, driven by a growing knot of worry, he left his office at noon, determined to visit her school without warning. As he approached the school gates, the usual noise of children laughing felt strangely distant, almost muffled by the tension twisting inside him. He walked across the courtyard, his steps slow yet firm, rehearsing excuses about forgotten lunchboxes or planned surprises, anything to justify why he was suddenly here in the middle of the day. Little did he know that the truth waiting for him inside those walls would strike him with more force than any fear he had ever imagined. As Daniel entered the lunch hall, he scanned the room for his daughter, expecting to find her chatting cheerfully with friends. Instead, he froze when he spotted her sitting alone at the far end, her shoulders hunched inward as if she were trying to fold herself into invisibility. Her tray held little more than a piece of bread and a carton of milk, untouched, and she seemed to be staring at it with absent focus. Around her, clusters of students chatted and laughed, but none made the slightest move toward her table. His heart clenched at the sight, a sinking heaviness settling in his chest. He had not imagined she was lonely. Emily had always been talkative at home, full of stories about school, but the silence surrounding her now swept a cold chill across his skin. His first instinct was to march straight toward her and demand an explanation, but something stopped him, a teacher's expression, watching Emily from the doorway with a mixture of concern and hesitation. Daniel shifted his gaze, trying to understand what he was witnessing, but before he could process it, a group of boys passed by Emily's table. One of them snatched the apple from her tray while another flicked a crumpled napkin toward her face. Emily didn't protest, she merely lowered her eyes, enduring it with quiet resignation that shattered Daniel's composure. He felt anger prickle his spine, but before he could intervene, Emily simply picked up her lunch tray and moved to the corner, as though the humiliation were something she had accepted as routine. Daniel's breath hitched. How long had this been happening? Why hadn't she told him? A swirl of guilt and helplessness washed over him as he stepped closer, each footstep heavier than the last. He wanted to shout at the bullies, but he also wanted answers, real ones. When he finally reached her table, Emily's eyes widened in shock. She tried to force a smile, quick and fragile, as though she feared he would see the truth she had fought so desperately to hide. But Daniel had already seen enough. He could no longer ignore the silent storm she had been braving alone. He sat across from her, gently placing a warm hand on her cold fingers, feeling her flinch from the unexpected comfort. "Emily, sweetheart, why are you sitting alone?" he asked softly, careful not to sound confrontational. She bit her lip, glancing around the cafeteria before leaning closer as if confessing a secret that had become too heavy to carry. She whispered that lunchtime had become the hardest part of her day, that friends she once trusted had drifted away, replaced by teasing and exclusion she hadn't known how to escape. She admitted she didn't want to burden him. He worked too hard, she said, always tired, always busy. Her words sliced into Daniel like glass. How had she felt she needed to shield him from her pain? How had he missed the signs? Daniel listened quietly, his heart breaking with each detail she revealed. She spoke of days when teachers didn't notice, of nights she cried into her pillow, and of mornings she pretended everything was fine because she didn't want him to think she wasn't strong. He realized then that his daughter had been fighting battles he never knew existed, battles she should never have faced alone. The father inside him stirred with a fierce protectiveness he hadn't felt since the day she was born. He assured her that none of this was her fault, that he admired her strength more than she could imagine, but that suffering in silence was a burden no child should ever carry. With a steadying breath, Daniel stood and approached the group of boys who had mocked her moments earlier. He didn't raise his voice. Instead, he spoke calmly, firmly, the way only a father who had reached his breaking point could. The boys shifted uneasily under his gaze, their confidence evaporating when they realized they had been seen, truly seen. A few teachers rushed over, startled by the unexpected confrontation, but Daniel handled it with a controlled resolve that left no room for misunderstanding. He explained what he had witnessed, refusing to let the issue dissolve into excuses or half-hearted apologies. The principal was summoned soon afterward, and Daniel walked into the office with Emily beside him, her small hand tucked inside his. As they sat together, he recounted everything, his voice steady but edged with the pain of a father who had been blindsided by truths he should have known sooner. The principal listened attentively, assuring him that immediate steps would be taken to ensure Emily's safety and well-being. With each promise, Emily's shoulders seemed to loosen, the invisible weight she had been carrying slowly beginning to lift. Daniel felt relief mixing with regret, relief that she would no longer be alone, regret that it had taken a moment like this for him to truly see her struggle. After the meeting, Daniel took Emily outside for fresh air, guiding her to a bench beneath the large oak tree in the schoolyard. She rested her head against his shoulder, something she hadn't done in years, and for a moment, time seemed to stand still. He told her he would visit the school more often, not because he didn't trust her, but because he wanted her to know she would never have to face anything alone again. He apologized, not for working hard, but for missing the signs, for believing her smiles without looking deeper. Emily wrapped her arms around him, whispering that she was just glad he was there now. As he walked her back inside, Daniel realized that the moment which had left him speechless at lunchtime had also awakened a new determination within him, a promise to stay present, to listen beyond the surface, to protect her not just from the world but also from the loneliness that hides behind silent smiles. Emily glanced up at him with a small but genuine smile, and in that expression, he saw hope beginning to bloom again. He knew their journey forward wouldn't erase what had happened, but together, they would rebuild her confidence, her friendships, and her sense of belonging. And for Daniel Reeves, that silent vow became the most meaningful responsibility he had ever embraced.